All right, hello everyone. Welcome to our Nitro workshop today on the new looping feature in custom actions, which I will make you aware that it will be released for Nitro workflows very soon. So you're looking for that next Nitro update in your Nitro Studio page. You should be able to see this looping feature in your custom actions, and then you'll be able to see it in your workflows in the not too distant future. But today we're going to focus on the custom action side of it. So I just wanted to put that caveat out there. And before I get started, looks like we have a few people coming in last minute, so I'll let them get settled in. And yeah, just a few housekeeping items. Well, my name is James Restivo with Crocan Software. I've done this a number of times. A number of you have been here before, so kind of know the drill. If at any point in time you have any questions, go ahead and pop them into the questions box. I have a couple folks on the call, Krista White from our marketing department, and we have Scott Restivo, CEO, on the call as well. So if you have any questions, they will be here to either chime in and interrupt me with those questions, which is fine, or they can save them towards later in the session as it makes sense. So feel free to do that. If you want to raise your hand, I'm going to go ahead and allow people to talk, and I'll unmute you if you have a question. If you'd rather just kind of say it out loud versus type it, sometimes it's easier to get the question across and verbally than versus typing it out. So if you want to just raise your hand, we can go ahead and unmute you and have that conversation as well. So let's go ahead and get into it. And looks like we're good to go. Got the attendees all set. All right, good. And we'll go ahead and get started. So looping feature in custom actions and workflows. What is this all about? Well, the idea behind it is that you can create a loop of actions in your custom actions and workflows that will do one or any number of tasks, one or more tasks on one or more items. And there's a number of ways that this can be implemented with the various possibilities of attaching it to a number where you can increment through, or attaching it to a query list where you're incrementing through the query list items. And I think the best way to kind of showcase this is to kind of get into a few examples here. I'm going to start with a simple example. Kind of what you see on the screen now is a fairly simple example, but also a very powerful example of what this looping feature can do. And then I'll get into a little more complexity, and then I'm sure there's room for even more complexity, or something in between. And if you have any specific use cases that you're like, well, maybe could this work for this scenario? Again, raise your hand or ask the question, and we'll go ahead and address that and see if we can get you the help and assistance you need to make it work for you. So good. All right. So let me set the stage a little bit here with what you see on the screen. And I'm going to go over to a different list here. I'm going to open this up in edit mode to show you. So kind of set the groundwork here. What we have is a situation where we have an equipment list or an assets list. If you're using our asset tool, you could use it for this as assets or equipment, either way. And you have barcodes, right? So you got the assets, you have the equipment, whatever it is, you have QR codes, barcodes, whatever they are. Basically a serial number or some kind of number, barcode number that is going to identify that asset amongst all the others. And there's a few different functions that we can do here. The one I'm going to show you is kind of more simple, create the asset. There's also options for updating assets, which could be great for inventory purposes and things like that. But creating assets is kind of a simple use case that we can wrap our heads around pretty quickly. And essentially what you're going to be doing is you're opening up a Nitro form like you see here. Of course, you could modify it to be what you need it to be. This is sort of just a sample we threw together with a few test options in here that aren't really relevant, but they just happen to be there. But essentially I have the barcodes field that you see on the screen right here, right? So I got the barcodes screen section. And what we're doing is simply, we'll take our barcode scanner. We could open this form up on our phone, as a matter of fact, because we have the mobile responsiveness with Nitro Forms. We could open up this form on our phone. We could go and scan barcodes with our phone and pop the information into this barcodes box. And then we can hit a function or a custom action called create assets. And that's going to go and create a record in the system for each one of those barcodes. And I'll show you how that's working with the looping feature. But you can see how this could be used for updating as well. So if you wanted to change status of assets don't have the workflow completely built out for this one, so I won't show it today, but it could be easily put in place where we're updating the status to something, right? So now we're going to, in our workflow and in our custom action, take the barcodes that we have here and click this button, and we're going to change the status of these assets, assuming we can find them in our system, and mark them as in service. So things like that. And then of course with the gateway control, you could even say, okay, if you don't find that asset barcode number, if it's not met, that condition is not met, then go and create the asset. So you could kind of do it in that way as well. So you could both update existing assets and create new assets with the list of barcodes that you blip into this screen. So that's the one, kind of one use case that we're going to talk about, or the creating assets specifically is the use case we're going to talk about with the custom action we have built over here. And so kind of want to set the stage there, show you this loop control. This is a new feature that you're going to see right here, create asset for each barcode, right? So this is the loop control, and there's, I'll open up in just a minute, but what you see where you can access it is under your events and controls screen over here. And you'll see there's a loop control that you can just drag and drop as you would any other action or control onto your screen here. Now, just a quick side note, this is only going to work for the designer mode of the workflow designer or custom action designer. If you're using the classic legacy, we call it, of custom actions or workflows, this will not be there because we don't have that concept of looping in that interface, right? So we can't really put it there. So this is only there for the designer interface, which you should have available to you if you're on the updated version of NITRO. That should be there for you. And I'm just going to go ahead and delete that one. Now, let me show you what the anatomy of this looks like here. So you'll notice that we have a node coming in, but certainly we can have, well, we have two right here, actually, two nodes coming into this action, and we can have multiple nodes coming into this kind of gateway control or check, you could call it, and then exit loop. So we have to have at least two coming in, and we have to have at least two going out, right? So one is going to be to enter the loop, and one is going to be to exit the loop. And how do we know when to enter or when to exit? Well, that's done through a number of different ways. Now, let me just open this up. And you'll see what we have on here is a couple different things. So this, you could do it by date. And I'm just going to add a new one to make sure that all those options are available. I think it's going to make me do something. Let me just do that. Well, let me configure it now. Okay, well, let me configure it now. Okay, great. So you have the loop control settings, you have different loop types. So you can loop through in a date. So you could say from a start date to an end date, create a number of records, right? So this could be for tasks over a number of days, or it could be for preventive maintenance. For instance, you could create your tasks every day over a number of days, and your start date and end date could be absolute, where you could say, I want to start on the 1st of October and create items all the way through to the last of October. And it'll just loop through increment by day, and that's going to create an item each day, or run through the loop essentially for each day in the month of October. And then what happens on each one of those days is up to you, right? Create asset for each day, or whatever it might be. This could also be dynamic. We could take the information from our list. If we had a start date in here, we could pull a start date and we could pull an end date. So based on the item that's working on, it could could use the information from that item where it's clicked. So it can also use functions in here. So if we wanted to have a date, like a due date, let me see if I have a due date in here. I'm going to use like use modified date. So you can do a modified date, and then you could do just some kind of date field, and then we could even do a function in here where we could add to that. So we add a date to that modified, and it'll loop through those n number of times. So modified, and then we could do 5. So that's going to loop through 5 times or for 5 days through that, because we have modified as a date, we have our end date, and we have every day. So we could do it every other day. We could do it. So a number of different options there. On the number, we could just simply say loop through X number of times. So we start with a 1, again, end with a say end with a 5. And we can increment every 1. So again, this is absolute number of times it's going to filter through 1 through 5. So it'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's going to do 5. And then every time it loops through, it'll increment that number. So you don't have to do anything special. It's just going to go ahead and increment that number for you. Again, we can use placeholders to dynamically choose the start number and end number, which might be more relevant for end number because let's say you have kind of example of purchase request line items and you wanted to create an asset for each of those line items in a purchase request. You could do that by using the quantity field. Let's say you go buy 5 laptops. You want to go create 5 laptop records in your assets list. Well, rather than doing that manually, you could have a loop that goes through and creates that asset until it hits the number of quantity purchased, which would be the dynamic field here of whatever it is. And we'd have to get the exact field, but it'd be something like that, quantity, whatever it is. And then we also have the query list option. So the query list option, I'll show you in kind of the other more complicated workflow I have set up, where this will look at a query list of an item or an item collection, and however many items it finds, it'll loop through each one of those items and could take an action on them, or it could, it's going to do something to those items in that query list. Whether it's update status, close it out, mark it as complete, whatever it is, we can take some action on those items that we find in that query list that comes back. And I want to talk a little bit about variable collection, because this is another option where we can take multiple items, and what this is intended for is for multiple records or multiple instances in the same field. For instance, let's say you have your assigned staff field on a ticket, a person or group field, again, multiple users in it. And so you want to iterate through those users and create tasks for each one of them. What you can do is use a variable collection, which is going to get to that group of users, and as it loops through, it'll take each one at a time and create a record or a task or whatever it is that you have set up for it. Let's say you create a task for each one of those people, and you're going to be able to do that through through this looping. So there's a few things we'll have to set up in the update item actions, a few new functions that we can take a look at to make that work. But that's how that would work. And that's actually what we're doing here with the barcode. If you look at the barcode setup we have here, just for completeness sake, I want to get that arrow there. So we got variable collection of barcode list, and we're getting that barcode list from our form over here, which is in this field here. So this is one way to do it. Of getting this barcode list, and we do it through a variable that we have up here called barcode list, and we're splitting that list. So this is one way we did it in the particularity of the way this is set up. We have to do like that split and use the ASI code. I think that's the code for spacing, where it's going to split on the space or on the return line, and each one of those records, every time it finds a return line, it'll be a new barcode. And the person or group field, I think it understands automatically that there's a common separator in SharePoint that between those people, so we'll know when the next person should be used for the next task. So that's how we're doing the variable collection. We have to put our collection of people into a barcode list, or into a variable, which is barcode list in this case. We could do that in a query list action. If we wanted to do something with query list, we could do that. There's a number of ways to make that happen. So we get our list of items that we need to take action on or do something with. And now in this case, we're going to create an asset for each one of those barcodes that we just saw on that screen over here. And we can do that by using our common, add list item action. It's one we've seen before. We're going to run for the current item because we're going to and put something in. I guess it doesn't matter which one you choose here, but current item, we're going to put in the equipment list, and we're going to set our value. So we can do this a couple different ways, and you see these tildes here. So I was showing the expression builder in an earlier workshop, and so that's where this stuff's coming from. And I'll kind of show you what the difference there and what those things look like. But when we're doing a loop control, we can use this function called get iteration value, and then we're going to call the loop control that we're referencing, because you could have a loop within a loop, right? So you could have a workflow that has multiple loop controls, multiple gateways. So we need to identify which loop are we talking about. We're going to get the get iteration value just means if we're doing if we're doing a query list or a variable collection, that's going to make the most sense because we're going to get information from, what's the actual item we're working on here. And then we create a title based on that as well. So you can see there's that get iteration value option in here as well. We're going through that loop control and getting the barcode number specifically. So we're going to create an asset record or equipment record that has asset : barcode number. And so that's what's going to be in the when this gets created. So that's how we do. That's how we know that's how we know which item we're working on. We got that get iteration value function that's going to make that work. So let me just show you kind of the difference here between the classic way we've done things where you can just type in the function and then you have to make sure you know what the parameter is in this, which is fine. If you've been using NITRO for a while, you probably get a good sense of what you're supposed to be doing with these functions and what you're supposed to put in there. But for areas where you're not really sure what you're supposed to be doing, we can build out these things, these mappings with this expression builder that we have. And I won't go into this in detail because I did talk about this on a previous workshop, but just kind of give you a quick refresher, a quick reminder what it's all about. You have different expression types that you can put into your mapping. Is similar to if you just typed it in, you could put a function, you could put a literal, fixed value, you could put a placeholder value, you can do a number of things there. And you get the same options here. We can choose to pull, current item, a loop control item, a variable, a function. It just gives you kind of a better way to do it in the sense that you're not fat fingering things or potentially putting things in the wrong order, because another really cool feature of this expression builder is that it tells you exactly what it's looking for, right? So in this case, we want a string concatenation, and then you can have a number of string items, of course, concatenated in that string concatenation. So we have the plus button to add more. And then it's what are we looking for? Text column or value. Okay, in this case, we're doing a fixed value, which is asset : space. And then we're going to, what are we appending to that? Well, now we got a function of the get iteration value, and we're getting that fixed value from the loop control. All right, so then it goes through, it iterates through. So create an asset for barcode 1, go back and check and say, okay, is there another barcode that we haven't worked on yet? Okay, then it'll go through and do it again and again and again until it hits the end of it and there's no more barcodes, and then it's going to exit that loop. So that's really simple. Create the asset, loop through, and exit the loop.
Hey,
right.
James.
Yes.
We have a question here. I'm so sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine.
But I think, so looks like we were wondering if you can set it up so it takes care of multiple actions in a loop.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's going to be the kind of the second scenario I'm going to talk about here with a little more complexity to it.
Oh, great.
Where, so talk about, simple scenario, just have one task, one item or one action, and it does it and it's done. So in the more complex scenario we're going to talk about here, and this can be used in a number of different ways. This could be used, in our project management tool, or if you're using SharePoint for project management, usually have like a 3-tier structure for your project management. In this case, we're using problems, which has a 3-tier structure with a problem, a ticket, and tasks. So in this use case, what we're doing ultimately is we have this concept of a problem ticket in our help desk tool. Attach that problem ticket or multiple actual help desk tickets. Then attached to those help desk tickets are corresponding tasks. So when you go and resolve a problem, what it does is it resolves all the tickets. So in kind of a use case for that would be when someone printer goes down, a lot of people email in about it or send tickets about that printer. Maybe you have some kind of setup where you automatically create tasks on those tickets when they come in based on the type of ticket it is. And so now you've got like 5, 6, 7 tickets with each one with its at least one or more tasks, and then you want to be able to close all those things all at once. And what you want to do is connect all those to a problem, and then when you resolve the problem, you close out all of the child items, which would be the tickets and the tasks, right? So if you want to do both of those things, how can we do that? We got to loop through and get the tickets, got to loop through and get the tasks. And I'll show you how that's working with our setup here to make that work. So again, kind of the structure is, grandparent item, which is the problem, child item, parent item, I guess you could say, is the ticket, and then the child item is the task. So each ticket has multiple tasks. Each problem has multiple tickets, which in correspondingly could have multiple tasks. So what I've done is a little more complicated scenario here, where you have multiple query list item actions, and you have multiple actions happening when we run this custom action. And so what we first need to do is, we're going to set a variable for to capture a ticket ID, and I'll show you how that's used later on in this flow. And just kind of walk through what we're doing here. First, you want to get the query list of the tickets. So we have our problem that we're running this action on, and then we want to get the list of tickets through this query list item collection of items. So we're going to know it's tickets with the related problem ID, which has the same ID. And those tickets are also not closed, because some of those tickets could have been closed out previously, and you don't have to make an update on them because they're already closed. But in this case, you want to capture the ones that aren't marked as closed and make them closed. So first thing we do, we got to get those tickets. So we get all that list of tickets, that's fine. And then we enter our loop. And we're going to use that query list we just ran of the get related tickets. So for each ticket it finds related to that problem, it's going to run through this loop. So now we've created we've got the tickets. Let's say it's 5 tickets, and we want to iterate through each one of those 5 tickets and find their tasks, and then close out their tasks. So the first thing we're going to do is get the ID of the item, and we do that again through that get iteration value, where we're at this specific instance of the loop, what's the ID of that ticket, and we're going to get that information from our and put that into our variable, and then we're going to use that variable in another query list action to get all the tasks. So kind of the layman's way we're explaining it is that we're looking at our list of tasks and saying, okay, for task 1, which has ID of 1, let's say, for ticket 1, excuse me, that has an ID of 1, let's say, we're going to go and get all the tasks for that one and see all those tasks. Now I've got that group of tasks for that ticket 1, and then we're going to do something with that. We're going to go ahead and complete those tasks. So we're using that query list action, which is we're going to loop, kind of essentially it's almost like a loop in itself. We're kind of looping through those tasks and closing them out. Kind of very simple. Of course, in that scenario, you can only do one at a time, but or one group at a time, or one action at a time, really. So we're going to complete those tasks, then we're going to close that ticket, and then we're going to go back to our loop and say, okay, what's our next ticket? We got ticket 2. What are the tasks for ticket 2? Let's close those tasks for ticket 2, and then check to see if there's any more tickets. So once we get to the end of that loop, go through, and it's going to exit that loop and then resolve the problem. So not a very difficult one to set up. It is a little more, but it does have a little more complexity to it in that sense that you're running multiple actions at one time on that one iteration. So again, you can see you also have an iteration within an iteration over here, where you got the multiple tasks that then you're completing out those tasks. So we could even take it a step further and put another loop in here to do, like if you had like a 4-level scenario, you might even want to put another loop in here. Say for each one of those tasks, there's, I don't know, an assignee that you want to notify and do something else too. So you want to complete the task and notify an assignee. If you want to do multiple things on that group, that's when the loop is going to come into play. Right, so we could even do a loop in here that says, loop control, put that in here. Of course, I like to move things around to make it look good. And I'm gonna put that actually after the tasks. Where is it? Okay, go over here, go over here. All right, so I can change all my nodes around. Messed it all up. Sorry, guys. This is what happens when you kind of just do things on the fly. Anyway, just kind of delete those, and I think that one's orphaned as well. Let's do another loop here where we get the open tasks, and then we do another loop control where we go through and then let's see, come from here back to loop. So now the exit would be, let's kind of put it in here. So look a little something like this. We do a send mail action. And so we're gonna get our open tasks. we're going to get into this loop. We're going to, let's see, put that over here, kind of make it a little better. All right, so get rid of those nodes. So then we can enter our loop here. And we'll do complete the related ticket tasks, and then get back into our loop to go send an email for the next task. And then, of course, we have to change a few other things around in this workflow, but kind of the point, I'm not going to go through and configure the whole thing. I just wanted to kind of show you the possibility here that you could take it a step further and then, have a loop within a loop, which makes it a little more interesting in the things that you can do with it. Let's see if I can get this going. There we go. Okay, good. All right, so now kind of a loop within a loop, which is pretty cool. So now you can get the tickets, update the ticket, get those open tasks, get a specific task and send an email about that specific task, and then close that. Essentially, instead of closing all the tasks like this one's doing, we would close each one of those tasks individually because we loop through, send the email, close the task, loop through, send the email, close the task. And then we can, once we exit that loop, we can come over here to close that ticket and then loop through for the next ticket. So you can even within like one iteration of this loop, we could have another iteration of another loop that would take it even further to do different things. And like I said, mostly, with a query list action, you could go and take one action on all those items pulled back from the query list, but the loop allows you to take that a step further and, take a step further and do multiple actions on those items that are pulled back from that query. So a couple different ways to use that loop control. Some other examples we had pulled up over here. Let me just take a look. Another one, more complicated one my team put together in this document that I'll put up on our website. You want to update items in a list from a web service response using a variable collection loop. So again, it's like kind of the same idea, but now we're pulling the information from a SQL database or web service instead of within a query list. So query list is going to be local to your SharePoint environment. But if you want to go get information from another database, we can use that loop control to go and loop through and do something with the information we get back from your database. We could replicate assets. So kind of similar to the barcoding we're talking about, we could replicate assets or create assets based on some number of items in that, based on asset type, we could create those items. We could run the send mail action, like I just showed here. We can run a send mail action for items within that loop and then do something, and then also do something else with those items in that loop. And actually the send mail action, as a matter of fact, you probably can't set that up to work on a query list. You'd have to do it on some kind of loop because we need to identify and isolate each one of those items and send a mail just for that item. And then the use case I showed you, which is basically closing tickets and tasks based on resolving a problem. Now you can take that same concept and apply it to like a project. You close out a project, maybe it's no longer relevant or no longer valid, and you want to close all the milestones and all the tasks related to that project without leaving everything orphaned or open. This allows you to go through, find everything related to the project and close it out automatically with one click of a button. Really, just one click of a button, you can go and close hundreds of items and don't have to worry about it and hunt, pack, and search through and what's open and what's not. Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to show with that looping workflow, and hopefully you guys got something good out of this. Are there any other questions that came in?
One thing I was asking about is this whole thing of the gateway where you can go like make a decision point like before you enter the loop or something. I know you're very complicated there, but the gateway control is useful not only with looping, but anywhere in the visual workflow, right?
Yeah, the gateway control is really, really great because now you can even add another layer of complexity to this workflow where you could, go do this loop and then maybe you have I don't know, another loop or whatever, if that makes any sense. You'd have to take a look at specific use cases on what would make the most sense, but you could, I think very simply just kind of show you could, this could be a good decision point to say, were there any items found in this get related task query list? And if not, just simply end the process. Don't even have to bother with all this stuff because there's nothing found. So you could even introduce a gateway at that point and determine whether or not it's even worth continuing into the execution. Or based on the type of tickets that you find, maybe there's certain types of tickets you want to leave open and don't want to close out. And in that case, you would you would have a gateway to say, okay, what's the ticket status in this particular iteration? And if it's no good, then we can go back, we can simply go back and loop through again. Let's say we want to do this, like gateway here. And I'm going to, this kind of shows you can have multiple incoming nodes to this loop control, because we're going to have one up here as well. We can even have a gateway here, like check ticket category. And so in this case, you could say if the ticket category is, I don't know, hardware request, don't close it, equals hardware request. Just kind of like making stuff up as we go
on the fly, right?
And then you choose, we have to label these to make sure we're going in the right direction based on what was found. But essentially you could say not hardware.
You could have like two different loops based on different criteria, or one aspect of the gateway could go to a loop, and the other aspect maybe just exits or goes to send a notification or other simple action, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. You could take that for the conditions matched is hard request, and do not wear that. There we go. Let's get that right. So yeah, essentially it could come in here, checks the checks to see if it's a hardware request type ticket or whatever, meets some criteria. If it does, it'll go through the loop. If it doesn't, it'll go through the loop. If it does, it'll skip it and go back to the loop, which will then check the next item in the list. I'll iterate through. So every time this is hit, it's going to iterate through to the next one, and it'll move it to the next phase in the process.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So it's like as you enter the loop, you can check the condition on the ticket or purchase item or asset or whatever, and then decide whether you want to continue to loop or just loop, like skip that item and loop back to the next item.
Right.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that's actually a really good point, because it could give you a way to skip items in that loop. You want to go and query all the items, but you only want to take action on ones that meet this particular criteria.
Yeah.
Well, then I can do that.
Yeah, we were talking about like projects earlier. You might have like 10 subtasks, and the ones that are completed, you don't want to go through the loop, but the ones that are not completed, you want to go through the loop and maybe send an email or text message or Teams message or escalate it or something.
That's right.
But the ones that are done, there's no need to do that as you go through the whole list of subtasks that are related to the project or whatever. That's interesting. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so it really opens up a lot of possibilities. And just a couple other notes about the loop is that, if you ever wanted to take that like loop iteration value, get it out of there. So like the, what's the start node, what's the end node, you get all that information from
the pancakes, please.
You get all that information. Oh, you're not muted. Sorry.
Oh,
you're not.
Sorry. I'm making breakfast. My daughter. Sorry.
It's all good.
I have a mute button on the microphone and a mute button on the headset, and I press the mute button on the headset, not the microphone. Anyways, yeah, I'm making pancakes for breakfast. I've been working so much, I haven't had breakfast yet, James.
Oh my God, I know. It's one of those days, huh?
Yeah, but there's other cool things with this visual workflow designers like debug and all those other things. So I don't know if you want to go into that right now, or different versions you can have and export, import, but that's in the visual workflow designer more than the.
Yeah, but that's absolutely really, really great point. As you design this, as you build this and save it, publish it, obviously I'd have to complete these out here, but if you could go into the debug mode to find out, okay, you're going to take action on a particular item. Is it going to honor this process or not? So you kind of want to have a test case where you know what it should be doing. And then if it does the right thing, you've got it built properly, or you might have a couple test cases where you want to. And this is kind of general workflow, business process design is always good to have a couple of test cases to make sure everything's working the way you want it to be working. So you can have a couple test tickets, test problems, whatever it is, test projects. You run through the process, and does it do the right things? Does it go down the right node? Does it go down the right path? When you see the debugger, you kind of see it goes through all that. I guess I could simply take these out.
Yeah. And another point you can make here, James, is that your actions and that the actions can call another workflow you already created, whether it's even a workflow of our, our workflow preferably, but it could be a Power Automate workflow or another workflow, SharePoint workflow that from our workflow manager, you can launch like a sub workflow that you created elsewhere, under the actions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Within that loop, all these actions are going to be available for you. I think there is, invoking Azure functions, sending Teams messages, invoking, here is invoke workflow.
One of
So
our
you
other
could even,
workflows.
right. So you can come in here and invoke another workflow that we've already put into place.
Exactly.
Or Power Automate. I don't have any set up specifically for
It
this
should
list.
really say Nitro workflows where it says Crocan, and we probably should change that, but that means another Nitro workflow that's running.
Right.
Established. I mean, not running, but it exists, or a custom action for that matter, one of our Nitro custom actions.
That's right.
So I don't know. The more we use this, the more we see how incredibly powerful this workflow designer is getting. It's incredible.
Honestly, I really love using it because we use it. As I'm sure people on this call know, we use it internally for a lot of our stuff, and so that's how we stay up on it and get find these features and find these things that we're consumers of the product. So not just the president, we're also a client. Right? Those old, what was it? It was Cy Sperling or what that guy's name? Anyway, dating myself a little bit. The old commercial about the hair plugs or whatever it was.
Yeah. Right. James, could you address a question about on-premises versus on the Office 365 versions of this looping, when that'll be available?
Yeah. Absolutely. So it looks like also someone raised their hand. So I'll answer the question, then I'll unmute the person who raised their hand. So the first question here, is a loop available for on-premises? Let me double check on the version that it was released in. I don't have that right in front of me. Let me just double check here. Kirkanian.com. It's actually in there. In our supports. Oh, version log right here. Let's just click over to that. So yeah, it may not be in the on-premises version yet. I don't know if we released an updated package. It did just come out not too long ago for custom actions. I think we also wanted to make sure it was available for workflows before we released the update for on-premises. So to answer your question, I don't think it's there quite yet, but it was loop control. Okay, so we did release the loop control on 9:30 for workflows. So it is out there for workflows for Office 365 folks. For custom actions, it was released a little bit earlier. I think 65. Yeah, 65 at the beginning of September had that custom action. So I think ultimately we wanted to wait until we had it for both custom actions and workflows before we release an on-premises update. That should be coming down the line. I'll double check with my dev team. I don't have a timeline on that for on-premises at this point, but it'll be soon.
To Giovanni on that, right?
Yeah, it'll be soon. All right, and Jim, let's see, I think I'm unmuting you. Did you have your hand raised? I don't know if you wanted to say something or just hit that accidentally, but
no,
I unmuted you.
I was curious on when you brought in the workflow, what is the syntax to run like a Power Automate from Nitro workflow? Like how do you get that syntax to actually grab the Power Automate workflow?
You get it from the Power Automate.
Right. There's a certain flag in Power Automate that, and forgive me, it's escaping me at the moment, but
hit Power Automate. It's kind of like a REST call in a way, but you do get it from the Power Automate.
Is it easy? I mean, is it easy to get that?
Yeah. So it's the trigger for the workflow is what matters, and same as like with our Nitro workflows, the same thing. We have to have the user triggered option enabled in order to get it from the reauthenticate.
It's hard to do when you're doing a demo and thinking about
it. We don't go into Power Automate all that often, so.
Well, once in a while they have a feature that you want to throw in your workflow, and
absolutely. Or maybe have it already established, or it has like these connectors to some like outside database that.
I'm just messing. I absolutely is correct. Trigger. So it has to be. It's based on a trigger, and I think it is when tasked to assign new email. forget exactly what it is.
Okay, so that's probably been my problem. That's how you get that. It's based off of a trigger. Okay.
Yeah, it's based on the trigger. I wrote it down somewhere. I probably have it in my notes somewhere. I just don't have it right in front of me. But there is a particular trigger that we can use that where you get an HTTP.
Well,
Let's see. It's like actually
yeah.
not even HTTP.
We need to do like a help article on this or another, workshop about integration between Power Automate and Nitro workflows because it's useful to have both options available.
Yeah, like even just adding a user to a group, like a SharePoint group or something.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to have to build all that yourself necessarily.
Yeah.
Let me see if there's anything in the dot help.
Yeah, thanks. So look for that. I'm trying to remember what it was, but there was a trigger for it somewhere. They'll give you so it'll give you that HTTP request, whatever it is, and then you just pop that into your workflow.
Let's take that as a to-do to get that back, and if we don't have it in our dot help, we'll create an article on how to do that, and maybe a short little tutorial even like. I know I've done it before. I just don't remember. It's about a year ago.
I know. I did.
It's just like some URL that has to be correct,
Yeah, I know. I did it not too long ago myself. So we'll find the information. We'll get it over to you, Jim.
Okay.
Yeah, well, let's make more of a buzz about that by, either another workshop or a tutorial or let people know because it's not like Nitro Studio or Power Platform. It's just preferably Nitro Studio as the primary workflow, but you want to use these accessory capabilities in Power Automate or whatever if you need to. And there are, like you said, Jim, some things in Power Automate that are already built or somebody in the company built them and you don't want to have to rebuild it.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, and there's also the idea we can also launch existing SharePoint workflows, the 2013 and whatever workflows from the past. I mean, they are a little outdated, but some people have a lot of legacy workflows they don't want to necessarily recreate, or they can bridge a gap between creating them, what's created already and creating the Nitro workflow. It gives like kind of a temporary bridge so that until you get them in Nitro workflows, you can use the SharePoint ones, But that's SharePoint, that's not Power Automate, that's the SharePoint workflows.
Yeah, I remember it being fairly easy to find, but I'm not seeing it right now. So I'll have to look back through my notes and find what it was. But anyway, yeah, that's a good point. That's a good question. Find that. The Empower, they'll give you that HTTP.
If you click on SharePoint, does it tell you? Doesn't it tell you something like post something? Or?
If you're on the SharePoint one, that's going to be SharePoint workflows like on the on the list.
Oh, I'm sorry. If you click Power Automate, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There it is. Is it a post? Does it say something about post URL? Do you have to look? Is that
post
in there?
URL, yeah. And some
you put that in there.
Yeah. Let's take a look at that. It's pulling up like blog posts. I'll post that to a group.
I'm looking in our workflows. We just should be in our. It should be in our manuals. If it's not, we'll put it in there.
Yeah, I know. I wrote it down somewhere. I just got it.
And then Power Automate has like a URL you put in there with it. Is that?
Yeah,
so it knows where to go. So Nitro knows where to go.
Yeah, that's it. So I mean, you could call that. You could call that from maybe we could call it from a web service.
I think you're right. It's a web something.
Yeah, it's a web service some kind. Yeah.
Let's see, great. Let's try this over here. No designated events, instant cloud photo, no. Web service. No, that's the flow name. Let's try this. Service bus. I don't know. All right. I don't know. We'll find it.
All right. Cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Because a lot of times they don't play well together if you run them on a modified or something like that.
Oh, the flows?
Like Nitro's modified, run on modified, and then you have Power Automate running on modified.
Oh, yeah, that could be.
They're competing against each other.
Yeah.
Be nice
Yeah,
to just
that
call it.
happens. Yeah, exactly. That happens sometimes. Yeah, I see what you mean. I get your point. Exactly. Yeah, if we wanted to run the Power Automate flow at the same time the item is modified as, yeah, I get your point. Makes sense. Cool. All right. Any other questions? Looks like didn't get any other questions coming in. Anything else in the questions box?
I'm not seeing anything else in the box for now.
Okay.
If anyone has any questions, now's a good time to punch them in there.
That's right. And just so you know, there's this whole document we got put together here for, use cases and how to use the this looping feature. There's quite a lot in there. There's a lot of possibilities, I think, is really what it comes down to. There's so many options and possibilities. I was chatting internally a little bit earlier today in preparation for this workshop. Like, what do we really show? There's just so many possibilities of what this loop control could do to automate things and make things easy, especially where you have to iterate through multiple items and at one time. It just it solves a lot of really interesting problems that you might be having. And so I mean, that's kind of embedded in the nature of this document is how much you can do with it, because there's so many, lots of pages of information here. But yeah, so oh good, another question just came in regarding, can you add members to a SharePoint group using a loop? So I think that kind of echoes a little bit of what Jim was just asking about too, which is because if you call a different flow or call a SharePoint flow, like we're not, NITRO doesn't have a way to add users to a SharePoint group, but if you had either a web service or a SharePoint flow that would do that, you could call that SharePoint flow as part of the loop. So yes, that would be possible. So again, kind of extending the NITRO a little bit beyond what it can do out of the box, or what's native to it. You could make that happen for your scenario. We could definitely add members.
We use Power Automate with a service we pay for called Plum Sale. That's how we
Okay.
do it. And you can add and remove users from SharePoint groups. Comes in real handy.
Okay. I believe this customer is on premises, so they might not have the Power Automate option. All right. Good. Well, if you have any other follow-up questions or want to get more details about the looping workflow, let me know. We can schedule a follow-up call. But appreciate everyone coming on today. I want to give you a little bit of your time back for the hour. We got about 10 minutes left, so we'll give you that time back. This recording will be up on our website. I forgot to mention that at the beginning of the call, but that's, as per usual, we'll put it up on our website and it'll be available for reviewing later on. But again, any questions you have, let me know. I'll be putting this document on our in our NITRO release notes. I mean, if you aren't aware of our NITRO release notes, we have the version log, which is one aspect, but then we also have these NITRO release notes over here on quirkanian.help, where it gives a little more context about it. So I haven't gotten the latest one up here yet because I was waiting for that document from my team regarding the looping configuration. So it took a little time to put together, but I'm going to put another entry on here so that you'll see those release notes for 0.68. For on-premises customers, you'll see those updates as when we get the next version for on-premises ready, which I'll check with my team, but hopefully it should be soon. But yeah, and then you'll get the full capabilities of this looping workflow and both custom actions and workflows. And yeah, great. Very good. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate your time, and we'll be talking to you soon. All right, take care.